Hey guys, just wanted to show off a pretty expensive build. It is a lot of fun. The budget is, yeah, there's no budget. The character is very expensive, but it's a supporting fire tactician. Um, Give you a glimpse of the AoE we're talking about here. This is all the AoE, and all you do, except for on bosses, you cast Thunderstorm, Despair, pop your Intimidating Cry, and then pop it. And that's your full combo. Otherwise, generally, gameplay is just clicking Supporting Fire, and Supporting Fire, just for a demo of how it scales, it's 1% damage per strength, and then 1% AoE per 3 dex. That's the general takeaway. 39 strength, 256 dex. And I'll show you a tier or max difficulty Zesh, and then I'll talk a little bit more about how I built the character. But yeah, the gameplay is hysterically easy. It's probably the last build I'll play this season. Maybe one more, but it's just going to be hard to beat the play style that this offers. Um, I mean, it's literally like 2.5 screens in every direction. And yeah, I mean, it's a one button build to the max. But yeah, show you this. The weak point of the build is definitely the single target. It is definitely more than capable of doing all the content in the game, but just for the cost the character has, and then the single target that comes out of it, it's definitely not as good as it possibly could be on another build. But for a one button build with this much AoE, I think it's more than acceptable. But that's definitely the weak spot. It's pretty much insane. A ritual, you just sit in the middle and click the button, covers the entire ritual. Abyss, you can just cast it on top of the abyss hole and run around. Breach is hysterically good for it. On average, in most maps, I average like 30 to 35 fragments or splinters per encounter. And Delirium, it's okay at. And then the Temple is definitely my favorite part. It's literally one rain of arrows or one supporting fire covers the entire room. So it's like no more of the hunting out the random straggler in the corner. You just walk in the middle and cast it in the dead center of the room, and you'll generally kill the entire room with one button click. Of course, he would go underneath right away. Okay, so again, not the best single target, but considering the AoE and the play style, yeah, I think it's pretty good. Not even through the loot filter, of course. Okay, so talk about the build. For the passive tree, it's pretty simple. Get as much strength as possible while maintaining nodes that offer CDR or some immense bonus. Um, so this is probably a little bit odd for most builds, but Cunning Fox, since this is just strength leading over here, and then attributes, and then quality. Quality actually gives 1% more damage per one quality, so quality is a pretty GG stat for this ability. Um, so that's the reason pathing for Cunning Fox. Then over here to the strength, and then uh, a controlled metamorphosis to save 3 passive points through these junk nodes. They'll grab the percent strength here, and then if you really want the dex, you can come over here and grab the dex. Of course, since the budget is unlimited on this one, got managed to buy a dex strength one. Over here is a megalomaniac with polymathy. To save the passive points to scaling through here for 7% attributes. And then up here for 13 attributes and movement speed, and the negative chaos res doesn't affect us because we are chaos immune. And then up here, this is a little bit nuanced. So I have an Against the Darkness with 12 spirit with 3% strength per notable. Then over here, I have a From Nothing with Zealot's Oath, so I can spec things within the radius of Zealot's Oath. So I'm getting 7 notables, or I'm getting 6 for 6 points. So each one, these are all pretty bad outside of the strength intelligence, or strength and spirit. But this one over here has Magnitude of Auras, which I'm running a Blasphemy, so that's scaling that, and then Withering Presence should be being scaled by that. I think that would just give it more duration. So this isn't completely useless. Yeah, this is a lot of spirits. 7 times 3 is 21, and then what is that? 54, 64, or 74 spirit. Then over here, you want to grab the minion CDR and area of effect. Minion command CDR. This is damage per minion in your presence for command skills. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 minions. So that's 70% increased damage right there. And then we come up here and we have a Heroic Tragedy to get percent ES from our strength. Since we have 1300 strength, this is 650% increased energy shield. We come over here because this is damage is extra chaos. And then up here for the AoE and reservation efficiency, we take this node up here because we anoint Gigantic, which does work on the supporting fire. However, it makes all the other minions cost more, so we have to counterbalance that a little bit with Lord of Horrors. AoE and Wither on hit, and then finally CI. The rest is strength, and then one little node that gets some stun avoidance and ailment threshold, but mostly the stun avoidance. And then we'll talk about the Ascendancy points. So the first one is persistent buffs have 50% less reservation. So Blasphemy takes half as much, Withering Presence takes half as much, and Convalescence takes half as much, and you can stick your little supports in here that also cost spirit, and that value gets cut in half. So you can fit quite a bit of extra auras in here. I should probably have like a frozen or a shock duration reduction one in here. But, you know, pick your poison. Which one you want to run. I've chosen to run Ignite and then minion damage while not on full mana. Seems to be working out. And then Supporting Fire, of course, grants you the skill Supporting Fire. Then up here is a bit odd because it's only really worth it with 1 armor for this build. Otherwise, you're probably better off taking like Presence Radius and just like Evasion Rating or something. So this one's saying it's gain deflection rating equal to 20% of your armor and 100% evasion as extra ailment threshold. I don't have a lot of armor, but because I'm wearing Warrior Invictus, I do get some armor and evasion rating. So for evasion rating, I have 2.2k, which is acting as ailment threshold, which helps me not get frozen, ignited, or shocked very easily, or electrocuted, I guess would be the other one. And the deflection rating equal to 20% of armor. So I have 1.4k armor, so I gain a little bit of deflection rating, 288. Chance to deflect 12% and reduce damage by 40%. This is okay. It's, you know, something extra on there. And then defend with 200% of armor. This is actually quite strong if you can manage to get more armor than I have. There are a couple ways you could try one with like global defenses. scale your armor. At one point, I did toy around with it, and I got up to 4K armor, which would have been double to 8K, which is not bad for the investment. It's really good for chip damage. Uh, Enemies have an accuracy penalty based on distance. This actually really helps your evade chance. It doesn't reflect in the character tip, but you will evade a lot of things with not a lot of evasion, which is quite good. Specifically, the farther away the mob gets, which most mobs in this or on this build should be because of how big the AoE is, they'll generally miss you more often. And then the other thing to mention about the 200% of armor, which I am currently not taking advantage of, but like nodes like this, 5% of armor applies to elemental damage. This actually gets doubled because you're defending with 200% of your armor at all times. Everything you do to your armor is doubled, right? So if I have, let's say I had 30% damage, or 30% of armor applies to elemental, with that node, it would actually be 60% of my armor is applying, or it's basically doubled up, right? It's a very, very strong ascendancy point. I just can't take it super big advantage of it because of the way the character's built a bit, but it is something. Unfortunately, supporting fire is on the Tactician, and the rest of the kit you kind of like shoehorn to work. This one is pretty good with it, but this is just kind of like there's no other choices. The allies in your presence have or gain added damage equal to your 25% of your main hand weapon. Supporting fire is never in your presence. I've tried both Alpha Howl and probably 200% increased radius of my or presence radius to the point where my radius was clearly going off screen because I thought, oh, maybe the minion's just like somewhere off screen so I can hit it with my radius or presence radius. So I tested with Alpha Howl. That's not the case. So supporting fire and presence radius, or anything to do with allies in your presence, just doesn't work. There's no way to currently get this to work from my understanding. So that's unfortunate because this is actually quite a strong node, and it probably, if this worked, you'd probably build it pretty differently with your weapon, because this is an attack and it does have a large multiplier for attack damage. However, this doesn't work, whether that's intended or bugged, I don't know. Banners would also be good, but the banners don't apply to supporting fire minion because it's never within radius. So again, unfortunate. The pin, these nodes are very strong actually, but they don't work for the way the character is built. And then these are totem nodes, which certainly don't work with the way the character is built. So that's why we go up this defensive pathing. Okay, so we'll talk about some of the gear choices. So for the gloves, it's strength and dex as a suffix, res, and energy shield, and as many sockets as you can possibly get. Strength and dex scales the AoE and the damage, and then the rest is giving you energy shield. Boots, strength and dex, energy shield, movement speed. Belt, there's two, or I guess three different options here. Ultimately, the best in slot would be a darkness enthroned with the strength and corrupted implicit, and potentially some res. Like if I could find one with cold res, I would wear it over Magnords. Because you can put the body armor, the 2% quality, inside the belt, but you would have to have a one that has 100% effect at the socket of gem to make it good. So then it'd be 4% quality per socket, which is then 8% more damage, which is actually quite good. Even though this is a massive amount of strength, 100 strength when you have 1300, adding another 100% increased damage when the pool's probably in the 1700 range or 1600 range is not that great. So 8% more damage from quality would ultimately be a much stronger choice DPS wise, but I need the cold res, and that belt doesn't exist, so I do not have it. The rings, you actually want unset rings on this, because we're using muster. So the more minions you can manage to summon, it's 7% more damage per. So unset rings enable more sockets for you to fill. So you definitely want 2 unset rings. On these, you want attributes, res if you need it. Evasion rating's actually good. Mana can be okay. But yeah, mostly just stats is the big thing. This ring I am incredibly proud of. I can't believe I hit it right. Strength, dex, attributes with evasion rating and the minion damage, and then I double corrupted it for strength and dex. This thing is an Asher Menace on my finger. Um, the shield, you want as high VS as possible with int, and then as many sockets as you can get with strength, and then also +2 to minion skills. The armor, there's another build or option. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to cover the other belts. The other belt is Magnord, and then Ingenuity would be the other one. I don't, unless you really want the rarity off Ingenuity, it's not really worth it, honestly. So even if I had 2 of these rings, it's still worse than a Magnord's as far as strength goes. So, I mean, it is an option, but again, I think Magnord's or Darkness Enthroned is the real choices. So okay, on the armor. So there's 2 options. There's Mortar Invicticus, which you want the one with all attributes per socket filled, right? Since you want dex and strength and int, you technically want so you can start getting your gems equipped. That line is very powerful for this. And then res, so you can afford more strength and dex on other suffixes on the rest of your gear to get more strength and more dex. I think you're getting the theme here. And then there, for the third line, there's a couple different ones. I've had additional spirit, and I just doubled up my clerics, or not doubled up, tripled up, I think, my clerics, which was okay, but it really wasn't doing much at the end of the day. Global defenses is okay. It scales your energy shield, your evasion rating, and your armor. So there is a play there. I think the other one is armor, spirit. Oh, and of course the one I have is hits against you have 20% critical damage reduction bonus, or reduce critical damage bonus. So this is 100%, and then with this note here, it's 120. Or 125, is this 25? Or no, it's 120. So this is a little bit misleading, right? At first I thought this would make you crit immune, but what it actually does is just, it's a reduction, not a less, and it does not make you, the mobs deal no critical damage, potentially, right? So if you're against like a super rare mob that has extra critical damage as an aura or an affix, and then you're in a map with critical damage on it, and the mobs have certain critical damage bonuses inherently, they can technically, let's say they have a 180% critical damage bonus when you've reduced it by 120, so they do 60% extra damage, which is still miles less than they would have done. But again, some people read this and they say, oh, I'm just crit immune if I have 5 sockets. That is not the way it works. It is still an incredibly strong defensive layer, but it's not making you not take crit damage if you have a 100% critical damage bonus reduction from enemy hits. It would have to say you take no extra damage from critical hits or 100% less damage. So just a little footnote there. Scepter, you want spirit as much as possible. Ideally, presence radius would be nice. Strength, and then minion skills. You definitely want a rattling scepter so you can get more skeletons for muster on this guy to keep scaling. Yep, and then sanctify it, of course, for the +5. And then the big boy here, the Vertex. So this thing is basically purpose built for this build, or very good choice. So the evasion rating's useful, the energy shield's useful. The equipment has no attribute requirements. It's kind of a little bit sly because it's actually very strong. And the reason why is because you need int, and you don't want to put on anything with int besides your rings via all attributes. So for instance, this shield has 30 int on it, and since the helmet has no int, or my items have no int requirements, I can put on the shield to get the int, which then allows me to get enough int for like level 20 gems or 21 or 19. So that line's useful. And then the big one is +4 to skills, and then 9% attributes. In an ideal world, I would get one that has 1 minion skill corrupted on it, but you know, that's an immense budget item. Not that this character hasn't already exceeded that, but I there hasn't been one up for sale. So if it does exist, I will try to get it to try to push this build to the absolute maximum. But so far, there's been nothing. And then the last one is you want an amulet that has minion skills and as many attributes as you can get your hand on. And for the Desecrated mod, there's two options. There's quality, which is more damage, and there's also you can get up to 20 minion CDR. The minion CDR is worse damage wise, but the quality of life with mapping goes up. And you notice that a lot when you're in like a map with a bunch of rooms. Like for instance, like the mansion. The mansion has like a bunch of little corridors, and sometimes you'll need to recast your supporting fire, and you can't because it's on cooldown. So more CDR alleviates that problem. On this, again, there's those two options. And prefixes, if you have a different base, you would want like flat energy shield, or percent armor, percent evasion rating, or percent energy shield with global defenses. And you definitely want percent strength over flat strength. So just keep that in mind. And then you can anoint whatever, if you don't have a nice polymathy jewel, you can anoint polymathy or polymathy. You can anoint titanic or gigantic. I chose gigantic because the node, or gigantic poly, because the nodes leading up to it aren't very good. 6% minion damage times 4 is not much, and then the strength to get up, or the pet travel points to get up there, this is just kind of, these are wasted points. Like 5 strength is kind of better for passive points, so I'd almost prefer if these were just 5 strength all the way up. So yeah, choose your anoint that fits the build. Okay, so skill gems. So on supporting fire, while you're leveling, I would totally recommend bidding 3. It's going to make the playstyle way more comfy. You don't get the more damage bonus, but you get 50% more CDR, or 50% increased CDR over this gem, which just feels way better to use. Muster, this again isn't very good until later when you have a lot of spirit. Oh, it's okay, but it really shines when you get more spirit. This is currently 49% more damage. And then Olna Tools Embrace. So because of this node right here, physical damage is extra chaos, and then this is 40% of physical damage is extra chaos. And then you have your minions applying Wither, and then you have Withering Presence. You can actually get full stack of Wither pretty easily. And then this compounds, or synergizes rather, quite nicely with Kurgo's Leash. So anytime you cast command or supporting fire, or a whatever command skill, you get Unholy Might for 15 seconds. You can even take out this gem and put another gem in. I'm not that sweaty, but you could put another one in. And then lastly, there's Dialas. There's a couple different choices here. Diala, in my opinion, ultimately ends up being the easiest, most straightforward one to use outside of its cost. 10 qualities, 10% more damage, and then +1 levels, rough. I think it's like 8% damage. So this is 18% more damage on its gem. And it also reduces the mana cost, which is helpful but not mandatory. Yeah, there is. I thought about another play would be like Rakiata's Flow with Imbibitor. Imbibitor would take all this damage is gained as extra chaos, release 2 gems, and the one in the tree, convert it all to cold, and then Rakiata's Flow would then make the monster's resistances inverted. So potentially more damage. I'm not sure. Probably not, but you'd freeze a lot of enemies, which would probably be a nice little safety layer. But that pretty much covers supporting fire. There's really not much here I would change. You're pretty limited as far as that goes. And Skeletal Warriors, basically trying to make them not die. So Elemental Army, Meat Shield, Last Grasp. So if they do die, they stay up for 4 more seconds just as decoys. And then you can even stick Withering Touch in here. I don't think Withering Touch is doing much, but there's really not a lot of supports that do much at this point for those. Thunderstorm, this is just to get a 30% shock, and then get Living Lightning up, which has similar scaling to Commanding Fire, but honestly, these guys do fucking 0 damage. They're so bad, I'm convinced they're bugged. But what they are good add is they hit really fast and they get resummoned for free, so they help ramp up the wither even faster. That's the main point of having those in. And then for Thunderstorm, use Commiserate, Overcharge, and then Lasting Shock. So, and Shock Conduction. So Thunderstorm always drenches. This one says any enemy that's drenched gets shocked. Baseline shock is 20%. This one gives you 50% increased magnitude of shocks with supported skills, so that bumps it up to 30. However, it shocks you back. But if you take this one and say, whenever you inflict an ailment, you remove that ailment from yourself, so it immediately removes the shock, and this one makes the shock last 100% longer, which would push it up to 8 seconds. Okay, Temp Chains on Blasphemy. This is probably my favorite defensive layer in the game. It slows at white mobs by 70%, which is incredibly useful. A little less effective on bosses and rares. I think it's like 25%. But we have slow potency, magnified effect, heightened curse, and then ritualistic curse. The curse delay is usually a bad thing, but since it's on blasphemy, it always is up, so you ignore the downside of this gem. Okay, withering presence. Prolonged duration, so the withers stay on longer. Upwelling, this is just a damage support to give myself more damage while I'm low on mana. Chaos Mastery to bump this level up by 1. Cool Headed to make ignites last on me less, or make ignites last on me for a lesser amount of duration. Clarity, mana regen. This is like super whatever. Wolfpack. I'm not sure if this is the right play. I might end up moving this because I want to try messing around with the Spectre instead of one of the minions. But this makes the... So Wolf has tremendous value. This gives you 10 summons for 60 spirit, so there's a lot of decoys out on the field. And with this, they can't die for 20 seconds after being reduced to 0. But they're not technically dead, right? So your Skeletal Clerics can heal them while they're on 20 or on 0 life. So they can be healed, unless I'm misreading something. That's what I think's going on. They get a bunch of attack speed while they're low on life. So while they're low on life and before they get healed, they start applying withering stacks really fast, which is really good for ramping up damage. Again, more attack speed, Elemental Army, Meat Shield, and then Romana's Requital. This doesn't really, you could just use the normal gem. I just did this because I had a spare one, but 10% of the damage is taken from one of your wolves before you. This is generally hard to use on like another companion build, but because you have so many wolves, this actually becomes quite a useful support. Skeletal Brute. This is used for the Intimidate, but I don't know if the Intimidate works because I never see the Intimidate debuff on the monster, but I'm assuming it does. Yeah, so Intimidate, Last Grasp, Calling Strike because they're an attack monster or attack summon, Meat Shield, Elemental Army. On the Clerics, cast speed makes them heal faster, plus level of skills, and then Brutus Brain. So you don't want your Skeletal Clerics dying because they're busy reviving your other enemy or your other allies. So, yep. And then I think Second Wind might work here. I need to toy with that more. I'm not sure. They have like a built-in cooldown for reviving, so I think I would want to run that, but I still need to toy with it. Also, if you notice this, so since we're stacking so much quality, they actually keep monsters that their enemies, allies have revived, immune to damage for 6 seconds, which is fantastic. Skeletal Archer, Last Grasp, Meat Shield, Calling Strike, more faster attacks. Then I've been trying to get this one to work. I don't know if this support gem works or not, but it's supposed to give me abyssal modifiers. I've never noticed a buff icon anywhere, and this guy dies all the time. So I'm not sure if this is working or if I'm doing something wrong, but that's what I got. Skeletal Reaver, it's just Withering Touch, Calling Strike, Meat Shield, Last Gasp. Frost Mage, same shit. No Calling Strike because he's a caster. Okay, Despair. So you got your less delay because we take Whispers of Doom for the additional curse, so that makes the curses apply slower, so you try to overcome that with this gem. Magnified curses or heightened curses for increased effect. 40% less cost, bigger AoE, the longer duration. And convalescence, prolonged duration, cooldown, so you have 2 charges, so 2 get out of jail free cards, minion damage, CDR. Probably put like a immune or shocks less on me or something in here soon. And then, unfortunately, there is no weapon swap tech. At first, I was pathing over to all the curse magnitudes, but however, unfortunately, there is a huge bug with supporting fire. Even though if you bind this to weapon set 1, if your points for like cooldown and damage are not in your main passive tree, they flat out just do not apply to supporting fire. So they just don't work, which is incredibly unfortunate. So no weapon swap fun here, or if you do weapon swapping, you have to have all your main points for supporting fire in your main passive tree. So unless you want to like sacrifice defense to go over somewhere else and get that, that could work. However, I don't have any defensive nodes. It's all through strength. So unfortunate. I think that covers all the gems. Passive points. Yep, I think that's everything. Build has done everything in the game. I will continue playing this. I'm still having a ton of fun. There's just something satisfying about hitting 2.5 screens of enemies every time I click a button and just looting. I'm still enjoying it quite a bit. Further improvements, try to get another ring similar to this, which probably won't happen, just for the extra strength and dex, and then a +1 helmet, and then the darkness enthroned. If I had the +1 helmet and the darkness enthroned, I suspect this would be probably 650 or 670k, which is roughly a 20% increase, which would be pushing the actual outer limits of this skill. Yeah, then I guess like technically you get this amulet with like +1 levels, but not gonna happen. Not gonna do that. And then a rite of passage would be the last thing I would really do. Alrighty, guys. I think that should cover it. Hope you guys enjoy. Would highly recommend this build. Supporting fire does damage basically as soon as you get it. But yeah, you can level it. You know, do whatever you need to do until you're got your first ascendancy. Go get supporting fire, and you can start playing it right away. Would highly recommending having bidding 3 support gem first though, because you're going to get 2 sockets in the skill, because it's a class given skill, so it gets sockets. I think it's level 20, 40, 80, and then 90 for the last socket. I think that's how it is, but you certainly start off with 2 sockets. So bidding, and then like brutality, I think is what I used early. But yeah, you'll poop on all the monsters, like the trash mobs, very easily with that combo. Alrighty, have fun. Thanks.